Lena had always liked quiet moments, and that was exactly what she found in her friendship with Evan. They worked at the same office in Seattle, often sharing the same elevator, the same break room, the same tired Monday smiles. Their connection wasn't loud or obvious. It was the kind that grew slowly, like something warm settling into the corners of two busy lives. And even though neither of them said anything about their feelings, the people around them easily noticed the way their eyes stayed on each other just a second longer than normal. That Friday evening, the office was almost empty. Most people had already left to enjoy their start of the weekend. Lena stayed behind to finish a few emails. Evan stayed because he said he felt like keeping her company, though he tried to say it casually as if it wasn't a big deal. But Lena felt the quiet weight of it. She always did when she finally closed her laptop. Evan leaned against the doorframe of her cubicle and asked, in a slightly nervous voice, "Are you hungry?" She looked up, surprised. A little, why? He rubbed the back of his neck, looking almost boyishly unsure. "I made dinner." "Well, attempted to make dinner. Do you want to come over? It's nothing fancy. I just thought it might be nice." Lena hesitated for just a heartbeat, not because she didn't want to go, but because the moment felt bigger than it sounded. Evan's voice carried an unspoken question, something tender and hopeful, and something inside her answered it before words even formed. "Okay," she said, smiling softly. "I'd like that." The drive to his apartment was short, but Lena felt her heart beating faster than usual. The sky outside was turning a muted purple as the last light of the day faded. When they reached his building, Evan led her up a narrow stairway with simple walls decorated by framed pictures of musicians and old concerts. Lena didn't know much about Evan's personal life, but she liked learning these small things: what posters he kept, what music he preferred, what parts of his life he chose to keep close. His apartment door opened to a warm, slightly chaotic scene, soft amber lights, a playlist playing quietly in the background, and the smell of pasta sauce that was definitely overcooked. Evan gave her a nervous laugh. "I know it's not perfect, but I tried." She stepped inside and felt something unexpected: comfort. The room wasn't fancy, but it felt lived in, safe, and real. A few guitar stands lined the wall, holding instruments that looked well-loved but untouched recently. A gray couch sat near the window with a blanket thrown messily across it. And near the kitchen counter, 2 plates were already set out. Like he had imagined her sitting there long before he worked up the courage to invite her. "It's perfect," Lena said. And she meant it. They sat down for dinner, and even though the pasta was slightly burned, they both laughed through it. Evan kept trying to explain the recipe. He was supposed to follow, but didn't. Lena couldn't remember the last time she laughed so easily. She found herself watching him, the way his eyes lit up when he spoke about things he cared about, the way he leaned forward when she talked about her dreams, and the way he sometimes paused mid-sentence as if he was trying not to say something else. Something deeper. There was a softness in the air that felt almost fragile. Their hands brushed when they reached for the same bowl, and for a moment they both froze. Lena felt a small spark travel through her, and she saw Evan swallow lightly, as if fighting the urge to say something he'd regret, or maybe something he desperately wanted to say. They talked about childhood memories, embarrassing school stories, and the things they wished they had done differently in life. For the first time in a long time, Lena felt seen, not in a dramatic or overwhelming way, but gently. Like Evan wasn't looking at her past or future, but simply seeing her as she was right now. When they moved to the living room, the atmosphere shifted slightly. The lights were dimmer there, the music softer, and the closeness between them felt thicker, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Evan sat beside her, not too close, but not far enough to feel like friends sitting casually. The distance between them felt like a question, one that neither of them dared to answer yet. Lena asked about his guitars. He laughed and said he had never actually learned to play them properly. "I always tell people I'm going to start next week," he admitted. "But next week keeps moving." She smiled. "Maybe you just need the right motivation." For a moment, Evan looked at her like he wanted to say, "Maybe that's you." But he didn't. Instead, he looked down at his hands, and the air grew warm with everything unsaid. Just as Lena felt herself sinking deeper into the moment, just as she wondered if tonight might change something between them. Sudden knock echoed through the apartment. A loud, cheerful knock, followed by laughter. Evan's entire expression shifted. His shoulders dropped, not from exhaustion, but from the shock of remembering something important. "Oh no," he mumbled. "I forgot what?" Lena asked, feeling her stomach tighten. He stood, rubbing his forehead. "I told my friends they could stop by tonight. I completely spaced out. I thought they wouldn't actually come." Before Lena could react, the knock came again, louder this time. "Evan, open up, man." A voice called from outside. Evan looked at Lena with an apologetic expression that said more than his words could. "I'm so sorry. I didn't plan for this. I really wanted tonight to be just ours." The words slipped out before he could take them back, and Lena felt a warm rush in her chest. But before she could respond, he opened the door. 3 people stepped inside Mark, Tessa, and Jason, full of laughter, energy, and familiarity. They greeted Evan loudly, then turned to Lena with curious smiles. She smiled back politely, but inside, something small and fragile cracked. The moment she had imagined quiet, gentle, maybe even filled with more confession than conversation, was gone, replaced by noise, jokes, and the sudden pressure of strangers who had no idea what this night was supposed to be. Evan tried to make space for her, kept glancing her way, kept giving her small, reassuring smiles. But the natural warmth between them had been interrupted, and Lena felt herself slowly folding her emotions inward again, unsure if they would ever get the moment back as the room filled with his friends' laughter. Lena sat quietly with one thought repeating in her mind, maybe tonight wasn't meant to be simple after all. The moment Evan's friends stepped inside, the energy in the apartment shifted completely. The quiet, almost intimate atmosphere that had lingered between him and Lena evaporated instantly. Laughter, chatter, and the sound of shoes on the floor filled the room. Lena tried to keep smiling, but she felt a subtle ache of disappointment. She had imagined a quiet evening with Evan, a chance to talk and maybe finally admit the things they hadn't said. Now it felt like that possibility had slipped through her fingers. Mark, Tessa, and Jason were friendly, easygoing, and obviously close with Evan. They greeted Lena warmly, which made her heart lighten slightly. But it also reminded her that this night was no longer just about them. Their sudden presence meant that Evan had a part of his life she wasn't fully included in. Lena wasn't upset. She just felt invisible in a small way. She was the quiet observer in a lively, noisy scene. Evan, however, seemed to handle it all with practiced ease. He laughed at jokes, moved effortlessly between conversations, poured drinks, and acted like nothing had changed. Lena watched him closely, fascinated and a little frustrated. He looked exactly the same as he did when they were alone, but now he was surrounded by friends. His attention shifted quickly from one person to another, his easy charm in full display. Lena realized she hadn't seen this side of him before, the side that was completely comfortable in his own world. It's confident and funny. And she had to admit it was a little intimidating. Tessa, quick to notice Lena's quietness, leaned closer and whispered, "So, is he finally asking you out?" Lena's cheeks warmed instantly, and she laughed softly. "No, we're just friends," she murmured. Tessa gave her a look that suggested she didn't believe a word. Lena didn't argue. She wasn't ready to put their feelings into words yet. Not when the night was already complicated. Meanwhile, Mark and Jason pulled Evan into the kitchen, lowering their voices. Lena could catch bits of their conversation, teasing comments about Evan inviting someone over. Evan's expression flickered nervously, and Lena's heart jumped a little. She could tell that whatever he was feeling, it was strong. It was written across his face. Even if he didn't speak the words out loud, Lena tried to immerse herself in the conversation happening around her. The 3 friends asked about her work, favorite books, movies, and funny childhood stories. She laughed, even relaxed a little. But every time she glanced at Evan, she felt that same mix of hope and worry. He seemed to be everywhere at once, chatting, pouring drinks, laughing but also constantly checking in on her, even if it was just a small glance. The room was full of jokes, playful teasing, and light arguments about who is better at certain games or movies. Lena found herself admiring how effortlessly Evan connected with his friends. He was magnetic, someone who could light up a room without even trying. But at the same time, she felt the sting of something she hadn't expected, the longing for the intimacy they had shared before the interruption. That quiet space where they could have just been themselves, without interruptions, without an audience. At one point, Lena excused herself to the kitchen to grab a glass of water. Evan followed as if reading her mind. She smiled, grateful for the small private moment. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly, his voice low enough that no one could hear. Lena nodded. "Yeah, it's fine. I thought tonight would be different." She didn't want to say more, afraid it might sound like a complaint or pressure him in front of his friends. He hesitated, then gave a small, apologetic smile. "I know. I wanted it to be different, too. I didn't expect them to actually come." There was a quiet honesty in his words that made Lena's chest tighten. She wanted to reach out and touch him, to tell him that it was okay, that she understood. But the noise from the living room reminded her that they weren't alone. Evan returned to his friends, and Lena went back to the couch. The group decided to play a lighthearted game, something like charades or trivia. It was meant to be fun, but Lena couldn't shake the feeling that her evening was slipping away from her. She laughed at the jokes, participated in the game, but her mind kept drifting back to Evan, to the unspoken tension between them, to the quiet moments they had shared before this chaos. Tessa noticed Lena's distraction and nudged her playfully. "You're not even trying to win," she whispered. Lena smiled sheepishly. "I guess I'm just distracted." Tessa raised an eyebrow but didn't push further. She seemed to understand that something more personal was happening here, something she wasn't part of. Evan's attention, meanwhile, kept flicking toward Lena, even as he joked with his friends, poured another drink for Jason, or explained some silly story from his childhood. His eyes kept finding hers. Each glance was quick, almost fleeting, but it carried a quiet intensity. Lena felt it, and it made her heart beat faster. There was something unspoken there, a thread of emotion that connected them. Even in the midst of this lively, loud gathering, time passed quickly. The laughter continued, the jokes became sillier, and the game grew more competitive. Yet in every moment, Lena felt the duality of the night fun and chaos outside, quiet longing inside. She realized that while Evan was completely himself around his friends, the version of him that she connected with most was still hidden beneath the laughter, waiting for a private moment to surface again. Eventually, there was a small pause in the game. Mark and Jason went to grab snacks, leaving Evan and Lena near the couch. The soft music from earlier now seemed to fill the space just between them, creating a small bubble in the middle of the room. Evan leaned back slightly, running a hand through his hair. "I didn't mean for tonight to feel like this," he admitted quietly. Lena smiled faintly, understanding. "I know, it's okay." Her honesty seemed to give him a small courage. He took a deep breath and said, "I invited you tonight because I wanted time with you. I really did. I just messed up. I forgot my friends were coming and I didn't want to cancel on them. But it was supposed to be just us. I wanted tonight to be different." Lena felt a small warmth bloom in her chest at his words. Even though the evening hadn't gone as planned, even though they were surrounded by others, his honesty, his quiet vulnerability, made her feel closer to him than she had in months. She wanted to say something to tell him that she felt the same way. But the laughter returning from the living room reminded her that the moment was fleeting. She tried to focus on the good in the night, the small moments of connection. The way he looked at her when he thought no one was watching, the tiny smiles that spoke volumes. Even amidst the chaos, she realized she liked seeing him this way. So effortlessly himself, so genuine with everyone he cared about. As the evening went on, Lena and Evan found small pockets of private conversation whenever possible. They shared memories, small jokes, and tentative smiles. Even in the presence of his friends, there were tiny threads of intimacy weaving through the noise glances that lingered. Shoulders brushing, quiet comments meant only for each other by the end of the night. Lena felt a strange mix of emotions, disappointment that the evening hadn't been as private as she'd hoped, admiration for Evan's ease with his friends, and a quiet, growing anticipation for the moments they might have alone. She realized that even though the night had been interrupted, the connection between them had grown stronger in its own way. And as the group began to wind down, with Evan juggling conversations and laughter, Lena understood that sometimes, even amidst unexpected guests and lively interruptions, true feelings found a way to surface. They didn't need perfect circumstances. They didn't need absolute privacy. All they needed was honesty, small moments of attention, and the courage to care, even when it was complicated. The night was far from perfect, but it had revealed something important. The quiet longing between Lena and Evan was real, undeniable, and waiting for the right moment to bloom fully. The game in the living room had taken on a playful energy, full of laughter and silly dares. But Lena felt a tension underneath, a quiet thread connecting her to Evan, even in the midst of the noise. She could see him, the way he leaned against the couch, running a hand through his hair when a joke landed too close to his private thoughts. He moved effortlessly among his friends, laughing, teasing, pretending everything was normal. But his eyes kept finding hers. Every glance was a reminder that this evening had started with an expectation, an intimacy that had been interrupted, and neither of them had forgotten it. Tessa had gone to grab a drink, and Mark and Jason were busy with a small prank involving Evan's phone, giving Lena a rare moment to watch him in the quiet of his own thoughts. He seemed to carry a weight she couldn't name, a nervous energy beneath the casual charm. She realized how much she had been imagining this night. The soft conversation, the gentle touches, the chance to finally admit how much she cared about him. But that hadn't happened. Not yet. The laughter and chatter around her seemed to fade slightly as she focused on Evan. He had been her anchor, her quiet connection in a busy world. And now she wondered if he felt the same way about her as she did about him. She wanted to ask, to push for clarity, but fear held her back. What if she was wrong? What if he didn't feel the same? The thought made her stomach tighten, a mixture of anticipation and dread that she couldn't shake. The game continued, and suddenly it shifted into a truth or around, with Evan's friends laughing as they tried to come up with the most teasing, revealing questions. When it was Evan's turn, Mark leaned forward with a mischievous grin. "Who's the person you wish you were alone with tonight?" he asked, loud enough that the room quieted instantly. The question landed like a stone in Lena's chest. She felt her breath catch. She looked at Evan, and in that instant, the world outside the room, the music, the laughter, the chatter disappeared. It was just him and her, even though everyone else was still there. Evan froze, his smile faltering, eyes darting away for a brief second before returning to her. She could see the hesitation, the struggle to decide whether to speak or retreat. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. The air between them was heavy, filled with all the words they hadn't spoken before. Lena felt her heart beating faster, her fingers tightening around the edge of the couch. She wanted him to say her name, to admit that she was the one he had been thinking of. But instead, he laughed nervously, the sound small and uncertain. "Oh, come on, Mark. You know I'm not answering that." Everyone groaned playfully, clearly disappointed that the question had gone unanswered. But Lena felt a mixture of relief and frustration. Relief because the moment hadn't been completely ruined, and frustration because she had wanted him to be honest, to reach across the chaos and finally show her what she had been hoping to see. Later, when the game had ended and Mark and Jason had gone to get more snacks, Evan and Lena found themselves alone in the living room. The soft music returned to its place in the background, filling the space between them with quiet warmth. Lena looked at him, her chest tight with anticipation. "Evan," she started, unsure of what words would come out. He held up a hand gently, signaling her to wait. His eyes softened, and the nervous energy that had been masked by jokes and laughter fell away. I invited you tonight because I wanted time with you, he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. I messed up. I forgot about my friends stopping by, and I didn't want to cancel on them. But the truth is, I wanted tonight to be different. Just you and me. I just didn't know how to say it. Lena's heart swelled at his words. They weren't perfect. They weren't dramatic confessions. But they were honest, vulnerable, and exactly what she had been waiting for. She reached out, her hand brushing against his for a brief moment. I know, she said softly. It's okay. I understand. He smiled, a small, unsure smile that carried all the weight of his feelings. For a moment the world felt suspended, and she realized that this night, despite the interruptions, had brought them closer than they had been in months. There was a truth here, a quiet connection that didn't need an audience or perfect timing. It just needed recognition. Evan took a slow breath, finally allowing himself to relax. I didn't want to scare you, he admitted. I didn't know how to say what I feel, but being with you tonight, even with everything going on, I feel something I can't ignore.